Good morning, everybody. It's Sunday morning, just coming up to 9:15 UK time, and we have been held up a little bit again by ongoing technical difficulties with Facebook, but we're here, really glad to be doing this. Lizzie and I are actually together this morning in different rooms of the same house. We're in Italy, in Tuscany, and we're here this week with a group of all of the people who teach integral coaching from around the world. So this is an incredibly special week for us, where we get together with people from Singapore, America, Canada, Colombia, Argentina, Switzerland, South Africa, the UK. I'm sure I've left some places out, but anyway, we've gathered from all around the world to study together and to deepen our practice. And so it feels like for me at least, a very special place to be doing this conversation from. And I'm feeling excited because we have a very fierce, loving, powerful source to work with today that's been gifted to us by the poet Jose Enciso. So we'll say more about that as we get into it. Hi, Lizzie.
Hello, morning everybody. Thank you for sticking with us and finding us here on YouTube instead of our normal destination. We're doing our best. Justin's been amazing this week, testing and making sure it's okay. And then weirdly, when we've gone to do it after hundreds of tests, it hasn't worked. So I hope you got to find us here. And we'll also post this video in Facebook so that it will be in the place where if you wanted to watch again, you could watch it again in the normal place. I'm really excited to be talking about this particular poem, and I'm grateful to Jose as well for being in support of us doing this, featuring his poem in our Turning Towards Life today. And we've got gorgeous views of somewhere in Tuscany. I haven't really looked at the map, and we arrived yesterday evening and it just looks completely gorgeous. So we're in this lovely place with a kind of tree-lined avenue where you come in, and a gate and all these things that's not normal for a normal living situation. So it's very wonderful and beautiful place to do this from.
So should we get going, Lizzie, and read this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to say a tiny little bit about the background to this. For some months now, I've been following the work of Francis Weller, and we brought a source by Francis right near the start of Turning Towards Life, the 5 Gates of Grief. And in listening to Francis's work over the last couple of weeks, I came across this poem which he read at the start of a talk, which was very powerfully named The Predator. And what Francis Weller has to say about this is, there's a part of us that's not even really a part of us. It was given to us long before we were born, that Lizzie, you and I have often called the inner critic, which I think is a good name for it. But the predator is an even more powerful name. It's the part that wants to eat us up so that we won't be at risk. And what Francis Weller has to say about this, and we can get into talking about this, of course, is that in the end, the move that we have to make is we have to defeat it, which is different from splitting it off from ourselves. It's different from pushing it away. In a way, it's a kind of integration, but it's where the power relationship is changed. So this is the poem he read by Jose Enciso. It's called I'm Talking to You. Long into the night, and still long to the dawn, past the parade of losses and betrayals of self, wrought of service to the wrong God, awoken from a fitful slumber, bathed in regret and remorse, a protest, profound, arises deep within my grief, a holy howl screaming at the thief. Hey, I'm talking to you. Yes, you in the corner, slinking and smirking. You who kept me down all these years. You who gave me crumbs and told me it was a life. This is not my life. This is insecurity, apology. I'm sorry if I offended thee. This is grovel and hovel, bow down that will keep you safe and sound. You broke into my house and rearranged all the furniture. You stole my childhood and made me a caricature. Hey, I'm talking to you. I want my life back. Not this check and double check, doubt and redoubt. Me, the nice guy with no backbone. Me, the nice guy who doesn't even know if he wants Mexican or Chinese. I don't know. What do you want? Me, the noble, beautiful, kind man who only sees ugliness and embarrassment in your mirror. I have given away too much. I have lain down deep in despair. I have almost given up hope. But you have not won yet. Right now, I'm calling you out. I'm not ready to die in a house decorated by someone else.
I'm talking to you, long into the night and still long into the dawn, past the parade of losses and betrayals of self, wrought of service to the wrong God, awoken from a fitful slumber, bathed in regret and remorse. A protest profound arises deep within my grief, a holy howl screaming at the thief. Hey, I'm talking to you. Yes, you in the corner, slinking and smirking. You who kept me down all these years. You who gave me crumbs and told me it was a life. This is not my life. This is insecurity, apology. I'm sorry if I offended thee. This is grovel and hovel. Bow down, that will keep you safe and sound. You broke into my house and rearranged all the furniture. You stole my childhood and made me a caricature. Hey, I'm talking to you. I want my life back, not this check and double check, doubt and redoubt. Me, the nice woman with no backbone. Me, the nice woman who doesn't even know if she wants Mexican or Chinese. I don't know. What do you want? Me, the noble, beautiful, kind woman who only sees ugliness and embarrassment in your mirror. I've given away too much. I've lain down deep in despair. I have almost given up hope. But you have not won yet. Right now, I'm calling you out. I am not ready to die in a house decorated by someone else.
One of the things I have really loved about reading this poem is feeling the rage in it. And it seems to me that sometimes rage is really what's called for. That we, all of us, I think, end up in this position in one way or another with its different forms. I really recognize the guy doesn't know whether he wants Mexican or Chinese. That's so familiar to me. And in fact, Lizzie, last night when we were on our way here in the plane and you asked me where I wanted to sit, I could feel exactly that's going on. I really wanted to sit by the window, but it took me a while to say, really want to sit by the window. And it may well be that this part of us that does this to us, that says, you ought to be ashamed. You're ugly and you should be embarrassed and you ought to keep yourself out of the way and not cause anyone any trouble. It may be it certainly seems to me it's an unavoidable part of us. I don't know anyone who doesn't have this in some form. And it may even be that it's useful, at least at some point in our lives, maybe very early on, in having us have a way of navigating the social world and not continually upsetting everybody by our uniqueness and our strangeness. So maybe it serves a purpose. But for most of us, as we get into adult and continue in adulthood, it's been going on way too long, and it comes at a vast cost. And we don't often know that it's not on, that it's not okay. Most of us, at least this has definitely been my experience, are trying to kind of wheedle our way, trying to live in its, in the midst of its constraints. If I just keep on trying to live in the constraint, then everything will be okay. So I'm really grateful for the rage in it, because in the end, it seems to me, aside from anything else that we might do, we have to be able to say, enough. This is not me. I do care even about small things, like whether we have Mexican or Chinese. I do have an opinion, but more than that, I have a life that if I'm going to live a life that I can call my own at any point, I have to stop being taken by this. And nicely isn't going to do it.
Yeah. And I'm struck by all of those things. You know, me asking where you'd like to sit on the plane is also about me not having an opinion of myself of where I want to sit on the plane. It's like, I totally get it. And people, you know, my husband will say to me, what do you want to eat tonight? You know, and I'm literally like, so for me, like this connection of recovering a sense of wanting, and to want is part of understanding and working with this thing called the predator or the inner critic. Because to want something is to really be outside of all of the ways that we're kind of second guessing ourselves and trying to put everybody else first, and considering everything around us before we consider our own needs and our own preferences. And this whole part for me, like the end of I'm not ready to die in a house decorated by someone else, like that's such a big line. Like I can feel all the ways that I'm perfectly willing to live in a house decorated by someone else, and that's not the part of me that's going to create anything. It's not the part of me that's going to make anything or tap into the life force that's my own. And because of all the ways that we've been taught to not make a fuss, to conform, to do what we're supposed to be doing, to live up to some kind of imagined standard of what it is to have a proper life, that feels so powerful. And it's such a journey to discover and uncover what this life is actually deeply aimed for, if you were to be still enough to listen and know even a tiny slice of what your own life's desire is. It feels like such a big question, and because it's so powerful, I really understand the thing you're saying, Justin, about maybe rage is required, because at least rage is some like it says in the poem, like calling it out. If we don't distinguish it out from the melange of what it is to be me, there's no way of working with it. There's no way of seeing the distinction between what's mine and what's the given, what's been given to me, like you said, what's been handed to me as a set of expectations or a set of rules or a set of shoulds and musts about a human life. And to make the distinction between a list of shoulds and the list of musts and the list of requirements that came from who knows where, parents, school, culture, newspapers, magazines. If we can't distinguish that out, how do we know what's mine and what's yours, effectively, or the world's? And this feels to me like a huge, deep inquiry into what it means to be a creative person. You know, someone who creates the life that's theirs, or creates a piece of art, or creates a project even. It's a really, really big question. And I so appreciate Jose for saying it like this, and the words that he's arranged in this way feels very necessary for all of us. A real gift.
You and I, Lizzie, have been talking for a while about power and about healthy power. And it seems to me that one of the aspects of this that has come forward in our conversation as we've been in this inquiry about power, which I know is a piece of work that we might want to bring to the world in a wider way, is that there's a kind of taking up of power that's available to all of us if we want to take it, that is life-giving. In other words, we start to find out that we are the locus of an ability to take action, to stand up for things, to have a voice that isn't in the world until we start to speak it, that can be of benefit. And one of the gifts of Jose's poem is that it's reminding us that one of the primary acts of being powerful in a healthy way is an inner kind of taking power. Very often when we inhabit unhealthy power in the world, either because we're too diminished, like, I won't say anything, or we're too overbearing or forceful at other people's expenses because we haven't done this inner power move, which is to say, once we start to see ourselves as not just one thing, but a being made up of many, 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 many parts, we can start to get curious about the relationships between the parts.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's different for different people, but for me, it's a revelatory move to be able to go, there's something of me that is not this thing. And for years and years and years, I thought that voice was me. I realized that I thought that. It didn't even occur to me. I thought it just seemed sort of self-evident to me that the world was a harsh place and I ought to be ashamed, and that criticism was coming at me all the time. And actually, I often thought the criticism was coming at me from everyone else, when in fact it was coming, I'd see someone raise an eyebrow and I would project my own assault by this inner predator part onto them. So it's a really powerful liberation to, using the word power again and again, I realized, to feel that I have something of me that isn't this, and that there is a responsible and energetic, and I think here is sometimes appropriately rageful way that I can exercise that power in order that I can then bring myself to the world. So not living in a house decorated by someone else, for me at least, becomes, there's so much that I respect about the people who taught me things and handed things to me, but in the end, I want to live in a house that I got to decorate with all of the influences that I chose. But more than that, I don't think I can make myself available to the world in a way that's a gift and that's life-giving until I do this. So this, I suppose what I'm saying is that finding out that we have to exercise power on our own behalf is a step towards exercising power on behalf of others.
Yeah, I'm really struck, Justin, by your connection of this with the power conversation, because it seems to me in this moment that all the ways that my wielding of my power is unhealthy is probably and possibly a learned response, a combination of the way that my inner critic has been established over my formative years, and to only exert power from things that we've learned about how to be from the people around us, and to not feel into what our own power is. is to perpetuate all this unhealthy power stuff that's around at the moment. And somehow when you said that, it just got really clear for me that if we're not in our own encounter with a self that's different to our conditioning, that's different to the sum of all of the things we got told of how to be in the world, all we'll do is perpetuate what the power was on us to others. And so this path of self contact and allowing ourselves, because we're in that contact, to be in contact with that part of other people too, helps us to be healthy, in healthy, psychologically safe relationship with other people, because we're not only seeing their conditioning from our conditioning, the deeper part of us, the more contactful, creative part of us, is able to see it in another when we've made contact with it in ourselves, and therefore we can speak to that part in someone. And the world becomes really different with two powerful people talking to one another that are in contact with something other than their superego, their inner critic, their predator. Otherwise, it's just predator to predator. And of course, it's just like a storm of judgment and God knows what that happens between us, that actually, in the end, doesn't produce anything. It's just a wrangle for wrangle's sake. And of course, there's all good intentions in that in lots of ways, but that's the thing about power, is that it's about moving the world, about being in relationship, that the world moves, that something happens. And for that something to genuinely happen with integrity, this kind of contact and generating that relationship with other people that has that part of them come forth as well to be in the conversation, feels like the way powerful things happen.
I stumbled across something new when you were just talking, Lizzie, that I wanted to bring in, which is, I think you're right that sometimes, often maybe the way that we're relating to other people is this inner critic part to their inner critic part. And that very often happens. It seems to me it's a really good explanation for the kind of wrangles we get into with the people we love and the people we work with. But it also started to strike me that very often, at least this has been true for me, is that when I'm living in a world, and this is why I think the predator is such good language for this, when I'm living in a world where I feel endlessly stalked by a force within me that will devour me unless I obey its rules. The other thing that I very, very readily do with other people is try to protect them from their own predator. So if they say something that's is less true of me now, I think, but I've known long periods of my life that if I were with you and you would say something that was risky, I would want to stop you for the sake of protecting you from the predator that I know from my own inner experience is so vicious and painful. I want you to stop so that you won't get eaten. And in that way, it's exactly the method by which this predator force in us continues, because I'm saying to you, Lizzie, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't step out. Stay small, because the monster will get you.
Yeah.
And when we live like that, we're doing, boy, do we need people? We need ourselves, and we need people right now to be in contact with our biggest, deepest, most ethical, most creative, most surprising parts of ourselves, so that we can act to shift some things in the world, both right here and the moment we're doing this. I'm going to protect you from your own predator force. We are doing exactly the thing that Jose is raging against, which is we're keeping one another in a house decorated by someone else because it's too dangerous outside. And that's does that seem that seems right to you?
Yeah, like that's like an amazing illustration of what I would call like your inner critic talking to my inner critic. Because when you say to me, no, Lizzie, stay small, that's your inner critic that you've learned how to protect yourself with, appealing to my inner critic that's probably had the same kind of messaging, and I go, oh, all right, Justin, yeah, I'll stay small, and then we both stay like mouses, because your inner critic and my inner critic are kind of in cahoots with each other, like they're kind of reinforcing. And then when someone comes along who goes, hold on a second, what is that you actually have to say? Like, I want to hear that other thing, not just the mousiness, not just the don't know what you want for Chinese or Mexican meal. There's another thing here, and I see it and I can feel it because I can feel it and see it in myself. That's the different kind of conversation that can happen between us.
Yes.
So when you say to me, actually, Lizzie, what is that thing that you keep trying to say but doesn't quite come out? Like, what's that thing? As in, not be hypnotized by the thing on the surface or the thing that's coming up kind of quite habitually, but what's beneath that? What's beyond that I might be really trying to say, but my inner critic's having its way with me, so I can't say it, albeit. And I think that's what I appreciate about what the kind of relationship that we have, Justin, and also the other people around us in our community, where I think we're trying to, because we're onto ourselves enough to know when our inner critic is around and when it's not, at least some of the time. And we hold a deep intention for being that for one another. There's a way that we can say, well, this is what you're saying, or this is how you're being. And I'm wondering whether there's something else here that wants to come forth that might be unacceptable, or holding you in a place that's not really where you want to be coming from more deeply. Or there's a kind of relational quality to it that we need each other to help with this thing. Like, it's really hard to work with this on our own. And that's what I'm feeling from your example particularly. It's like, oh yeah, like we could so be just reinforcing each other's inner critic here, or not. And what does the not look like, and how might we support one another in that?
Yes. And here, Lizzie, you're in really important territory. I think this is the territory that makes sense of this profession that we practice, of coaching, but also makes sense of lots of other things, which is that mostly we can't do this work on our own. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of big mistakes that we make in our culture. So the first big mistake is that we live in a world which reinforces this predator part. Think about all the advertising I keep on seeing, which basically says, you're fine as long as you're like everyone else. Be different from everyone else, as long as in a way you're still the same. It's like that thing when I walked into a shop in London last week. I may have said this some other week, but there's a big rack. It says, especially for you. Except it's not especially for me, it's for everyone. Oh, but then I get to know that I'm okay because I'm like everyone else, because I'm buying the same product. So there's all of that. Mm-hmm. But the other myth that we get into is that you have to do this alone. That somehow our own bringing ourselves into the world, our own unfolding is a solitary event. I have to muster the strength. And what I hear in you're saying is that actually our bringing ourselves to the world happens most powerfully in relationship. And it happens powerfully in what I'm going to call right relationship, where we're paying attention to this. You see, this line from Jose that I think is for me right now, is the central one. Me, the noble, beautiful, kind man who only sees ugliness and embarrassment in your mirror. And we need people around us who won't, exactly as you're saying, who won't get enmeshed in the story that we have about ourselves, the predator story, the inner critic story, and who will see the noble, beautiful, kind human being who's also there and speak to that, and who want to know what that has to say. Yeah. And that, I think, is a very particular kind of fierce commitment to make to one another, because it means that we also have to not, when I was saying before how easy it is for me to get caught up in my own fear of the predator, that when I'm in contact with your nobility, beauty and kindness, truthfulness, the risk for me is that the predator part goes, stop it, this is dangerous. And if I am not paying really deep attention, it's very easy to go, shut you down. So I can't see a way that one does this unless you're in relationship with at least some other people who are willing to keep on doing this work of paying attention and speaking to the parts of us that are not the parts that we're in the habit of allowing to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that line, the noble, beautiful, kind man who only sees ugliness and embarrassment in your mirror, it's in one sentence, it's the kind of, it's the sitting next to of our essence and our personality, if you like essentially there's such goodness. And of course, I don't, you know, I think looking in the mirror is such quite a thing. I mean, I often feel quite arrested about looking in the mirror. I look in the mirror and I think, oh, my goodness, that's really different to how I feel about myself outside of looking in a mirror. And I think mirrors are an incredible encounter with the superego. So I also appreciate that actual reference to, I know it's a metaphorical mirror that he's saying here, but I think also, you know, you're talking about marketing in the way that I don't know what the word is, like inherent in so much of the marketing and advertising and magazines and media is this, you know, are we living up to a certain kind of way we look? And it completely reinforces, like you're saying, about either we reinforce or we undo the superego. All of that stuff totally reinforces the way I'm already giving myself a hard time. You know, that when I look in the mirror, I see someone whose body is not the shape that it needs to be, or doesn't look the way that it should, or I haven't got the hair that I want, or, you know, hundreds and hundreds of things. And in those moments, that noble, beautiful kindness is so far away because we're all in relationship to ourselves from this inner critic perspective that the world is reinforcing all the time by showing us what beautiful means, by showing us what successful means. And so, of course, it then reinforces the nice guy with no backbone and the one who doesn't know what he wants, because that inner critic part is kind of being confirmed by the world. Yes, you're not pretty enough. Yes, you're not thin enough. Yes, you're not successful enough. Yes, you don't have enough money. Yes, you don't have the wife that you should have, or the children you should have, or, you know, it's just all there all the time. And no amount of that can be the thing that we're talking about, which is a relationship that where we see one another and we see beyond all of that. And how precious that is, and how starved of that we are when we don't even share like what's going on with us other than with our nearest and dearest. And even then, maybe we don't really either. So this kind of cultivation of connection and authenticity and transparency. We had that great chat about transparency before, where in order to be seen this way and to be in right relationship, as you say, this kind of transparency and admission of all of our not living up to the superego list is such a liberation, because it's like, mostly you say something, people go, yeah, me too. Or, oh yeah, of course I understand that. Whereas the fear is that when I step out of what the inner critic says I should be, your inner critic will going to get me back into line. And actually being the person who says first, this is what's happening for me, or I'm vulnerable in some way, it opens the door to such a different kind of relationship. And in this moment, that's what I'm taking this poem to be. It's like this deep invitation to just being revealing, being open, being vulnerable, being, you know, offering up of what's not living up to the superego standard as a route to seeing who I am and what I might be and how I might create in the world.
I have two closing thoughts. These are mine. So the first one is, appreciating again what Jose is bringing us about the huge no that we have to say. I feel this more and more and more, that it doesn't help us broadly to be accepting of the criticism that comes our way from inside. At some point we have to figure out that we're not going to live our life cowering from a predator at the door, and that the only path is to say no to it. But the second closing thought is, I having this playful thought whilst you're speaking, can you imagine what it would be like if on the side of buses and on the posters down into the train station and on TV, it said this: you are noble and beautiful and kind and good. And what we want for you is that you will decide for yourself what's life-giving and a true expression of yourself. Can you imagine if we were bombarded with that message again and again and again everywhere we turned, rather than everything that you've just said, which is, you don't have the right hair, you don't have the right clothes, you don't have the right body, you're not the right age, you don't have the right amount of money, but if you have our thing, you'll have it. If we were reminded of our freedom and our care and our responsibility and our goodness again and again and again, what a different world that would create for us.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing we don't hear.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited now. I can see like a big advertising banner or kind of Banksy-esque situation where we go and paint on walls or something to do that. Can you imagine? Ooh, interesting. So
Thank you
Justin,
so much.
you are kind and noble and beautiful, and I'm very grateful for you.
Oh, thank you, Lizzie. And you are noble and beautiful and kind.
Thank you.
And I want to say that to everyone who's watching as well. It may sound, some of us think this is twee or soft or something, and I think it's necessary and ethical and an act of great responsibility to know how noble and beautiful and kind we all are, and to draw on that in our lives. So this has been so glorious having this conversation with you, Lizzie, and for all of you who found your way to us, despite our ongoing kerfuffles with technology, which maybe one day, if the technology gods, who are actually real people, I understand, manage to fix this, we will find our way back live in the way that we have promised. But meanwhile, we'll finish for here and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See you next week.